The following story is a translated and adapted conversation, recounting supernatural experiences from around the world. This content is intended for entertainment purposes only. Listen with an open mind and enjoy the thrill of the unknown. The content in this video is purely for entertainment. Viewer discretion is advised. If you are easily frightened, be prepared some stories might just send chills down your spine. If you're ready, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and immerse yourself in the world of the unexplained. Ankh, the cursed symbol. The Ankh, an ancient Egyptian symbol of life. A sacred emblem representing immortality, divine power, and the key to the afterlife. But what if this symbol, meant to bring eternal life, was twisted into something far darker? What if, in the wrong hands, it became a beacon of death? Legends whisper that an Ankh, once cursed, does not bring life but instead takes it. A forgotten relic, drenched in malevolence, hidden away for centuries, waiting to be awakened once more. The market buzzed with life. Tourists wandered through the crowded bazaar in Cairo, voices mixing with the scent of spices, incense, and aged parchment. Beneath the golden hue of the Egyptian sun, a small, dimly lit antique shop stood at the end of an alleyway. Unlike the lively streets outside, the shop exuded an air of eerie silence, as if frozen in time. Inside, dusty artifacts lined wooden shelves, old scrolls, rusted coins, cracked statues of forgotten deities. The air smelled of aged paper and something else, something almost metallic. At the counter, an old man with deep wrinkles and piercing eyes watched the visitors closely, as if guarding the secrets buried within his store. The legend speaks of an Ankh of the damned, a relic once belonging to a powerful Egyptian priestess, Nephthara. She was a woman of unparalleled beauty and knowledge, rumored to have mastered both the arts of healing and the forbidden magic of the dead. It is said that she sought not just eternal life but dominion over death itself. She performed rituals in secret, using the Ankh as a conduit to the underworld. But the gods do not grant such power without a price. When her dark practices were discovered, the pharaoh condemned her, ordering her Ankh to be buried with her in a hidden tomb, sealed with curses to ensure no one would ever wield it again. Those who searched for it vanished without a trace. Those who claimed to have seen it spoke of unexplainable horrors before their minds slipped into madness. For centuries, it remained undisturbed, until now. The flickering candlelight cast monstrous shadows against the stone walls as Daniel struggled to comprehend what had happened. Emma lay unconscious, her breathing shallow, and the Ankh amulet pulsed with a sickly golden glow in his trembling hand. The hieroglyphics on the walls now seemed to shift, forming words that his mind screamed against reading. Professor Alistair, who had been examining the carvings moments before, backed away in terror. "We need to put it back, Daniel. This is not just an artifact, it's a seal. It was meant to keep something inside." Daniel looked at the amulet again, the weight of its history pressing down on him. The legend spoke of immortality, but at what cost? He had seen what it had done to Emma, how her body had convulsed when she touched it, how her eyes had momentarily turned jet black before she collapsed. A guttural whisper filled the chamber. "You have taken what was never meant to be found." The air turned thick, suffocating. The temperature plummeted. Dust lifted from the floor as if unseen feet disturbed it, and a deep, resonant hum filled the chamber. The torches on the walls flared unnaturally high, casting an eerie glow on the sarcophagus in the center. A crack splintered across its surface. Alistair grabbed Daniel's arm, his voice laced with sheer panic. "We must leave, now," but it was too late. The stone lid exploded outward, sending shards flying. A wave of ancient, stagnant air rushed over them, carrying the scent of decay and something far worse, something unnatural. The form inside the sarcophagus stirred, unfurling like a nightmare made flesh. A figure emerged, once human, now something far more sinister. Its eyes glowed with the same golden hue as the Ankh, its skin dark and leathery, stretched tight over an impossibly gaunt frame. Gold ornaments adorned its skeletal fingers, and a headdress of ancient royalty sat atop its head. The whispers returned, louder now, merging into a single voice that echoed through their skulls. "Your souls shall be my offering for eternity." Emma's eyes snapped open, but they were no longer hers. Alistair turned to run, but the unseen force slammed him against the wall with bone-crushing force. He let out a strangled gasp as the entity's shadow stretched toward him, engulfing him in its inky darkness. His scream choked into silence before he even hit the ground. Daniel staggered backward, gripping the ankh. His heart pounded as Emino, whatever was inside her, rose, floating inches above the ground, her arms outstretched as black veins spread beneath her skin. The entity spoke through her, its voice layered with 1,000 tortured souls. "You awakened me. Now, you shall serve." Daniel had no choice. With every ounce of strength he had left, he gripped the amulet tightly and thrust it toward the entity. A deafening scream tore through the chamber. The ankh blazed with an otherworldly fire, sending cracks of golden energy surging into Emma's possessed body. The entity shrieked, its form flickering violently, fighting against the seal that was once broken. For a moment, Daniel thought he had won. Then, silence. Emma's body collapsed to the ground. The chamber dimmed, the shadows receded. Breathing heavily, Daniel knelt beside her, pressing his fingers against her neck. No pulse. His hands shook. He had saved the world, hadn't he? He had stopped the curse, but as he looked at the amulet, now cool in his palm, a shudder passed through him. A faint, golden pulse still throbbed within the symbol. And then? Emma's eyes snapped open once more, a slow, sinister smile curling on her lips. Anubis, the guardian of the dead. The desert winds howled through the ruins of an ancient necropolis, whispering secrets of a past long buried beneath the sands. A full moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie silver light over the crumbling statues of forgotten gods. Among them, the towering figure of Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian of the dead, stood watching, a silent sentinel to those who dared to disturb the sacred tombs. Dr. Evelyn Carter adjusted her lantern as she and her team descended into a newly discovered burial chamber deep within the Valley of the Kings. Dust motes danced in the flickering light, revealing intricate hieroglyphs etched into the sandstone walls. The air was thick with the scent of age-old decay and something unnatural. Their goal was simple, to uncover the hidden secrets of the tomb. But as the group pressed forward, an unsettling sensation crept over them. It felt as if unseen eyes were watching, lurking in the shadows between the pillars. And then, the whispers began, soft, indistinct murmurs that seemed to echo from the very walls around them. Egyptian mythology tells of Anubis, the god of mummification and the afterlife. He is the guardian of the dead, the one who weighs a soul's heart against the feather of Mat to determine its fate. Those found unworthy were devoured by Emmet, the soul leader, while the righteous passed on to paradise. Legends also spoke of Anubis manifesting as a shadowy figure, appearing before those who sought to defile the resting places of the dead. Tales from ancient tomb robbers spoke of a dark entity that would stalk them, its glowing eyes peering from the void before dragging them into the abyss. Some claim that once a person saw the shadow of Anubis, they were already marked for judgment. As Evelyn traced her fingers over the hieroglyphs, she translated aloud, "He who disturbs the slumber of the dead shall face the judgment of the jackal." Suddenly, one of her team members, James, let out a sharp gasp. "Did you see that?" He whispered, his flashlight trembling as he pointed toward a darkened corridor. "Nothing, just stone and dust," but the air had turned icy, the very essence of the chamber shifting. "I swear I saw something move," James muttered, his voice barely above a breath. Ignoring his unease, the group pressed on, deeper into the tomb. The walls seemed to close in, the flickering light warping the carved images of Anubis. They reached the burial chamber, a grand sarcophagus at its center. Gold, jewels, and relics of untold value surrounded it. Evelyn's hands trembled as she lifted the lid of the sarcophagus. The moment it cracked open, the whispers ceased. Silence suffocated the room. Then, a low growl echoed from the darkness. A shadow detached itself from the corner, elongating unnaturally across the chamber floor. It rose, twisting, shifting, a towering jackal-headed figure with glowing golden eyes. Anubis. James stumbled backward, his breath ragged. No, this isn't real. But it was. The god of the dead had awakened. The figure raised a clawed hand, and suddenly, the torches lining the walls extinguished, plunging the chamber into suffocating darkness. The only source of illumination came from Anubis himself, his golden eyes burning like fire. The air thickened, the weight of unseen judgment pressing on their souls. One by one, the members of the expedition collapsed, clutching their chests as if their very hearts were being judged. The atmosphere inside the tomb turned suffocating as the last torch flickered, casting monstrous shadows along the walls. James felt his heartbeat pounding in his ears as the eerie silence stretched into eternity. Then, from the darkness, came a deep growl, one that did not belong to any living creature. He spun around just in time to see a pair of glowing amber eyes staring at him. A massive black figure, cloaked in the shadows, emerged from the corridor. Its towering form was unmistakable, half man, half jackal, the true visage of Anubis. The guardian of the dead had come to pass judgment. James stumbled backward, gasping for breath. The temperature dropped drastically, his breath now visible in the dim light. The weight of the amulet burned against his skin, as though it was reacting to the divine presence before him. He tried to move, to run, but his body refused to obey. The shadow loomed over him, and a voice not spoken, but resonating within his very soul echoed through the chamber. "You have defiled the sanctity of the dead." James shook his head frantically. "No. I didn't mean to, I just wanted to understand the past, I never meant any harm." Anubis extended a clawed hand. The ground beneath James trembled as ancient symbols lit up in a golden glow, forming a circle around him. His body was paralyzed by an unseen force as a spectral scale materialized before him. On one side, his heart beating, trembling manifested in a translucent form. On the other side, the feather of Mat, the divine symbol of truth and justice. James had read about this moment countless times in mythology, the weighing of the heart, a trial to determine if he was pure of soul or doomed to eternal suffering. The scale trembled, shifting slightly. James' mind raced. Had he truly been respectful? Had his pursuit of knowledge crossed the line into desecration? The memories of stolen relics, broken seals, and ignored warnings surfaced in his mind. His heart pounded harder, growing heavier with guilt. The feather remained impossibly light, unwavering in its purity. The scale tipped. His heart was heavier. Anubis raised a clawed hand, and from the shadows, a writhing darkness emerged. Feral whispers filled the tomb as grotesque, jackal-headed spirits materialized, their jaws snapping hungrily. These were the Ammit, devourers of impure souls. James' breath hitched as they inched closer, their hollow eyes filled with an insatiable hunger. "You are unworthy," James screamed as the darkness engulfed him. His vision blurred, his body feeling as if it were being pulled apart, piece by piece. The last thing he saw was Anubis standing motionless, his amber eyes watching in judgment, before the world around him collapsed into an abyss. 1 month later, the excavation team finally arrived to investigate James' disappearance. They found his abandoned supplies, his journal, and the amulet he had taken, lying untouched at the tomb's entrance, but of James, there was no sign. The villagers refused to step inside. They whispered among themselves, eyes filled with fear. One elder finally spoke in a hushed voice. "The guardian has passed judgment. The trespasser is no more." And as the wind howled through the dunes, a pair of glowing amber eyes flickered in the depths of the tomb, watching, waiting for the next soul foolish enough to disturb the dead. Sekhmet, the lioness demon. The golden sands of ancient Egypt stretched endlessly beneath the blazing sun, shimmering as if the desert itself were alive. In the grand city of Thebes, where towering temples honored the gods, a sense of unease settled over its people. Rumors whispered through the narrow streets: plague, famine, and war. They spoke of an ancient wrath returning, an anger that once drowned Egypt in rivers of blood. At the heart of Thebes, in the grand temple of Ra, stood high priest Amenhotep. His face, weathered by time and wisdom, remained stern as he traced his fingers over the sacred scrolls. The warnings were clear. When the people turned from their devotion, when arrogance blinded kings, she would return. According to the oldest scriptures, Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war and destruction, had once been unleashed upon humanity. Born from the fiery eye of Ra, she was sent to punish mortals for their insolence. Her rage knew no bounds, and she reveled in the slaughter, drinking the blood of those who defied the gods. It was only through trickery, turning the Nile red with beer, that Ra subdued her. Drunk on the false blood, she slept, and her rampage ended. But what if she awoke once more? That night, a crimson moon hung in the sky, casting an eerie glow upon Thebes. Jackals howled, and the Nile, once clear, ran murky and dark. Then came the first sign. The statue of Sekhmet in the temple cracked down the middle, her golden eyes seeming to glow with life. The priest gasped in terror. In the outskirts of the city, a farmer named Bick found his livestock slaughtered, their bodies untouched by human hands. He swore he saw a figure in the dunes, a tall, shadowy being with the head of a lion, eyes burning like embers. He fled, screaming of Sekhmet's return. By dawn, Thebes was in chaos. The king, Pharaoh Neferka, dismissed the rumors, believing it the ramblings of fearful peasants. But Amenhotep knew better. He had read the ancient texts. He had seen the signs before, the blood moon, the cracked statue, the slaughtered animals. Sekhmet was coming. And this time, there would be no beer to stop her. The desert winds howled as Professor Carter and his team pressed deeper into the ancient ruins. The stone walls surrounding them were covered in faded hieroglyphs depicting Sekhmet's wrath, entire cities engulfed in flames, warriors falling to disease, and priests cowering before the lion-headed goddess. Each carving told a story of vengeance, of punishment for those who defied the gods. Carter's flashlight flickered as they stepped into a grand chamber. In its center stood an obsidian statue of Sekhmet, towering over them with piercing ruby eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. The air grew thick, suffocating, and the scent of blood and decay filled their nostrils. Suddenly, one of the researchers, Ahmed, let out a strangled cry. He had touched the statue's base, and the moment his fingers grazed the cold stone, the chamber trembled. The torches lining the walls ignited with an unnatural crimson glow, casting eerie shadows that danced like wraiths. "We need to leave, now," Carter shouted, but it was too late. A guttural growl echoed through the chamber, a sound not of human origin. The ground cracked beneath their feet, and from the depths of the ruins, a pair of golden eyes gleamed through the darkness. A figure emerged, a towering lion-headed entity draped in flowing red garments, its fur shimmering like molten gold. It was Sekhmet herself, awakened from her eternal slumber. Ahmed stumbled backward, his mouth agape in silent terror, but the goddess raised a clawed hand. A fierce gust of wind surged through the room, and in an instant, Ahmed's body twisted unnaturally before collapsing in a heap. His skin blackened, eyes hollowed, and within seconds, he was nothing more than a shriveled husk. The remaining team members screamed, scrambling for the exit. The goddess's voice rang through the chamber, a blend of roaring fire and divine fury. "You desecrate my temple, you awaken my wrath." Her words struck like a thunderclap, and the walls began to crumble. Carter and the others sprinted through the collapsing ruins, dust choking their lungs. Behind them, they could hear the guttural laughter of the lioness goddess, her fiery presence illuminating the tunnels. One by one, members of the team were swallowed by the darkness, their screams cut short. Carter pushed forward, desperate, until he saw the faint glow of moonlight ahead. With a final leap, he tumbled onto the desert sands, coughing and gasping for breath. He turned back, expecting to see Sekhmet emerging from the ruins. But the entrance had sealed itself, leaving no trace of what had transpired within. Carter sat there, trembling. The curse of Sekhmet was real. He had witnessed it firsthand, and though he had escaped with his life, he knew the goddess's hunger for vengeance was far from satisfied. That night, as he lay in his tent, he swore he could still hear the distant growl of a lion carried by the wind, a warning that the wrath of Sekhmet was never truly appeased. The curse of Osiris. Legends whisper of Osiris, the god of the afterlife, who once ruled with wisdom and justice. It is said that he cursed those who dared to disturb the eternal rest of kings. This curse, ancient and unbreakable, dooms thieves and desecrators to an existence worse than death. But in the relentless pursuit of fortune, men often forget the warnings of the past. A vast desert stretched endlessly beneath the pale moonlight. The cold night air carried the distant howls of the wind, whispering secrets through the dunes. In the heart of the barren landscape lay the forgotten tomb of a long-lost pharaoh, its entrance hidden beneath centuries of shifting sand. A group of treasure hunters, led by the ambitious and reckless archaeologist Dr. Edward Sinclair, stood before the half-excavated entrance, torches flickering in the suffocating darkness. Ancient scrolls recovered from a temple ruin spoke of a dreadful fate awaiting those who violated the tombs of kings. Osiris, enraged by the greed of men, placed a powerful hex upon the burial chambers of Egypt's rulers. Those who dared to plunder them would be hunted by spirits of the underworld, their minds shattered by horrific visions before their very souls were torn from their bodies. Many dismissed this as mere superstition, But there were whispers of entire excavation teams vanishing without a trace, of men found dead with expressions of unfathomable terror frozen on their faces. Dr. Sinclair smirked as he pushed open the heavy stone door, a gust of ancient, stale air rushing past them. Behind him, his team hesitated. Superstition, he muttered under his breath, stepping inside. The chamber was vast, its walls covered in intricate hieroglyphs depicting the trials of the afterlife. At the center of the room lay an ornate sarcophagus adorned with golden carvings of Osiris. "This must be it," whispered Carter, the team's historian, "the lost tomb of Pharaoh Neferka." Sinclair grinned, "And we'll be the ones to unveil it." But as he reached out to touch the sarcophagus, the torches flickered violently. A low, guttural whisper echoed through the chamber. The ground trembled, and from the shadows, unseen figures seemed to shift. The air grew heavy with the scent of decay. Without warning, Carter let out a strangled scream, clutching his head. His eyes rolled back as he collapsed, his body writhing on the stone floor. The others rushed to him, but a chilling voice filled the chamber. "You have defiled the sacred tomb. The judgment of Osiris is upon you." The torches blew out, plunging them into suffocating darkness. A deafening silence followed then, one by one, horrific shrieks echoed through the tomb. Shadowy figures emerged, their hollow eyes gleaming with malice. Sinclair stumbled back, his breath ragged, realizing that the curse was real. When dawn broke over the desert, the excavation site lay abandoned. The remaining workers outside ventured into the tomb, only to find it empty save for scattered equipment and deep claw marks etched into the stone walls. Dr. Sinclair and his team were never seen again. But deep within the darkness of the tomb, faint whispers persisted. And the sarcophagus of Pharaoh Neferka remained undisturbed, as if never touched. The legend of Osiris' curse had claimed yet another group of unbelievers. The sandstorm outside the temple had settled into an eerie stillness, but inside the chamber, the air remained thick with an unnatural chill. James, Sarah, and Dr. Caldwell stood frozen, their eyes fixed upon the desecrated sarcophagus of the ancient pharaoh. The golden mask of the king lay cracked at their feet, and the hieroglyphics on the walls seemed to shimmer as if whispering secrets lost to time. A deep, guttural moan echoed from the depths of the chamber. The torchlight flickered violently, casting grotesque shadows along the walls. James turned to Sarah, his breath shallow. "Tell me you heard that," he whispered, gripping his satchel. Sarah nodded, her fingers trembling as she clutched the amulet they had found earlier, a relic adorned with the Eye of Horus and the sigil of Osiris. Dr. Caldwell, ever the skeptic, stepped closer to the sarcophagus. "This is just," he began, but his words choked in his throat as the ground beneath them rumbled. The hieroglyphs glowed with a crimson hue, the once forgotten symbols of Osiris' wrath igniting like fire. A shadow, darker than the depths of the temple itself, began to rise from the shattered remains of the coffin. Two hollow eyes of emerald light burned within the void, and a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere spoke. "You have defiled the resting place of the divine. Your souls are now bound to judgment." The chamber plunged into chaos as spectral arms erupted from the walls, reaching for them with skeletal fingers. James yanked Sarah backward as a ghostly limb nearly closed around her wrist. Dr. Caldwell stumbled, falling to the ground as the very air turned dense, suffocating. "The amulet," Sarah gasped. "Maybe it can stop this." With no other option, she lifted the ancient artifact high. The symbol of the Eye of Horus began to glow, casting beams of golden light that repelled the encroaching darkness. The phantom form of Osiris' enforcer recoiled momentarily, its emerald eyes narrowing with fury. James grabbed Caldwell by the arm, hauling him to his feet. "We need to get out of here now." The three of them bolted for the passageway, the spectral entity bellowing in rage behind them. The walls trembled, ancient stones crumbling as if the temple itself sought to bury them for their transgressions. Just as they reached the threshold, a deafening roar filled the air. The curse was not done with them yet. As they emerged into the open desert, gasping for breath, the temple behind them shuddered and collapsed into itself, as though the sand sought to reclaim it. Silence returned to the night. "Did we break the curse?" James panted, staring at the dust cloud that was once the temple. Dr. Caldwell didn't answer. He stood, eyes wide with horror, staring at Sarah. Her reflection in his eyes was wrong. The shadows around her body twisted unnaturally, and her pupils had turned an eerie shade of glowing emerald. "Sarah," James murmured, stepping back. A slow, knowing smile crept onto Sarah's lips as she whispered in a voice that was no longer entirely her own. "The curse is never broken, only passed on." The wind howled, carrying with it the echoes of Osiris' laughter as the moon disappeared behind a shroud of darkness. The cursed papyrus of death. In the heart of Cairo's bustling marketplace, among trinkets and ancient relics, there existed a hidden legend. A story whispered only among the bravest historians and the most daring treasure hunters, the legend of the cursed papyrus of death. It was said that whoever dared to read the incantations inscribed upon it would awaken an evil so ancient and so powerful that even the gods themselves had sealed it away. Dr. Adrian Carter, a renowned archaeologist, stood before a dimly lit chamber deep within the ruins of an undiscovered tomb. The air was thick with the scent of dust and decay. Hieroglyphs stretched across the walls, telling tales of forgotten pharaohs and vengeful spirits. At the center of the room lay a stone pedestal, and upon it rested a fragile, yellowed scroll, its edges crisp with age, its ink faded but still legible. Adrian's heart pounded as he reached out, his fingers trembling. The moment he lifted the papyrus, an unnatural silence swallowed the chamber. Even the flickering torchlight seemed to dim. His assistant, Daniel, took a step back, eyes wide with fear. "Professor, I don't think we should be here," Daniel whispered. Ignoring the warning, Adrian carefully unrolled the papyrus. The symbols were unlike anything he had ever seen. The characters twisted and coiled, as if alive. His eyes darted to the inscription at the bottom, translating the ancient text aloud. "By these words, the gates of the underworld shall open, and the forgotten ones shall rise." The papyrus, according to legend, was created by an exiled high priest named Nefer-Ka, a man condemned for practicing dark magic forbidden even in the age of the pharaohs. Before his execution, he inscribed a final curse upon the scroll, a spell capable of summoning spirits that should never be disturbed. To ensure its secrecy, the tomb was sealed for eternity, trapping the sinister force inside. But now, the seal had been broken. A sudden gust of wind howled through the chamber, though no entrance or exit allowed for it. The torches lining the walls flickered violently. Daniel let out a choked gasp as the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, slithering along the walls like living entities. "Put it back," Daniel pleaded. "We've gone too far." Adrian, however, was transfixed, his vision blurred as whispers filled his ears, words he could not understand but felt deep within his soul. His hands moved on their own, tracing the symbols as if guided by an unseen force. Then the ground trembled. A low, guttural voice echoed through the chamber, deep and ancient. The hieroglyphs on the walls began to shift, their forms changing before their eyes, dozens of them, watching, waiting. Daniel screamed as a dark figure emerged from the stone, its form amorphous yet unmistakably human. The air grew unbearably cold as it reached for Adrian, a skeletal hand stretching from the abyss. The eye of Horus, the watchful spirit. The scorching sun loomed high over the golden sands of Egypt as Dr. Jonathan Reeves wiped the sweat from his brow. The seasoned archaeologist had spent years searching for the lost chamber beneath the ruins of an ancient temple dedicated to Horus. This was no ordinary excavation. Legend spoke of a hidden relic, the Eye of Horus, a symbol of divine protection and immense power. As his team carefully dusted away the centuries-old debris, a peculiar engraving emerged on the temple's stone floor. It was an eye perfectly chiseled, surrounded by hieroglyphs warning of both fortune and doom. "Professor, I think we found something," called out Amelia Carter, his most trusted assistant. Her voice carried both excitement and apprehension. Reeves stepped closer, adjusting his glasses. He traced his fingers along the edges of the symbol. "The Eye of Horus, it is said to grant blessings to the righteous and unleash terror upon the greedy." "You believe in the curse?" Amelia asked, raising an eyebrow. Reeves chuckled, but there was a hesitation in his voice. "Science doesn't entertain superstitions, but history has a way of proving otherwise." After hours of meticulous effort, the stone beneath the engraving shifted with a low rumble. Dust and sand cascaded into an abyss below. A hidden passage revealed itself, leading into darkness. The team exchanged wary glances before Reeves, with a lantern in hand, descended the ancient staircase. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of time and decay. Walls were adorned with intricate carvings depicting the legend of Horus's battle against Set, the loss of his eye, and its rebirth as a symbol of protection and vengeance. Then, at the end of the passage, a grand pedestal stood, and atop it, shimmering despite the dim light, was the artifact itself, the Eye of Horus, enshrined in pure lapis lazuli, encased in gold. "It's beautiful," Amelia whispered, reaching out as if in a trance. Reeves grabbed her wrist. No sudden movements. He studied the relic, his mind racing with the possibilities. If this was truly the legendary Eye of Horus, they had discovered something beyond mere historical significance. A distant whisper echoed through the chamber. Both archaeologists froze. The air turned icy despite the desert heat above. The flickering flame of the lantern cast eerie shadows along the walls. The whisper grew louder, unintelligible but insistent. And then the sound of footsteps. But they were alone. Reeves turned sharply. Amelia's breath was ragged, her eyes wide with terror. A shadow slithered across the chamber, moving against the laws of light and physics. Then, the whisper formed words, spoken in an ancient tongue yet somehow understood. "The Eye watches, the Eye judges." The pedestal trembled, the artifact pulsed with a dim glow. The ground beneath them began to shift. Then, the lights went out. The ghost soldiers of Ramesses II. In the heart of the vast Egyptian desert, where the wind howls like the whispers of the forgotten, lies the legend of the ghostly warriors of Pharaoh Ramesses II. Many travelers and archaeologists who dare to venture into these ancient lands report eerie sightings, shadowy figures marching in perfect unison, spectral banners fluttering in a wind that does not exist. It is said that these are the spirits of Ramesses' elite warriors, cursed to forever patrol the sands, protecting their long-fallen empire. The golden sun begins its descent beyond the dunes, casting elongated shadows that dance ominously across the sand. The air is thick with an unnatural stillness, as if the desert itself is holding its breath. A small group of researchers, led by Dr. Alan Carter, an Egyptologist obsessed with uncovering the mysteries of the New Kingdom, stands at the edge of a forgotten battlefield. The remnants of ancient war litter the sand, broken weapons, shattered bones, and faded hieroglyphs depicting scenes of battle and divine intervention. A chill creeps into the air despite the desert's notorious heat. The team's local guide, Omar, shivers and mutters prayers under his breath. "We should not be here," he warns. "The spirits do not welcome the living." According to ancient texts and oral traditions, the soldiers of Ramesses II were the mightiest of their time. They fought bravely in the Battle of Kadesh, securing the pharaoh's place as one of Egypt's greatest rulers, but their loyalty came at a cost. When they perished, it is said that Ramesses himself, desperate to maintain his empire's strength even in death, called upon the gods to bind their spirits to the land. Now, under the light of the moon, they march once more, their spectral forms eternally reliving their final battle. Those who witness them are often found days later, wandering aimlessly, their minds shattered by something unseen. As night falls, Dr. Carter and his team set up camp near a partially buried obelisk, its carvings still whispering tales of war. Cameras and motion sensors are placed strategically, in hopes of capturing evidence of the supernatural. The team gathers around a flickering fire, discussing the legend, their voices tinged with both excitement and unease. A sudden gust of wind extinguishes the flames, plunging them into darkness. A deep, rhythmic sound begins to echo through the dunes, the distant yet unmistakable pounding of war drums. Omar leaps to his feet, his face drained of color. "They are coming," he whispers, his voice barely audible over the growing wind. Then, from the darkness beyond the dunes, the first figures emerge, silent, clad in ancient armor, eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The spectral army of Ramesses II has returned. The desert wind howled through the ancient ruins, carrying with it the whispers of the past. Dr. Evelyn Carter and her team stood frozen, their eyes locked onto the phantom army marching towards them. The figures, clad in spectral armor, with their weapons gleaming under the pale moonlight, moved with a silent discipline that sent chills down their spines. One of the soldiers, distinguishable by the golden embellishments on his chest plate, stepped forward. His hollow, glowing eyes met Evelyn's, and a voice echoed through the night, a voice neither human nor earthly. "Who dares disturb the eternal watch of Pharaoh Ramesses?" Evelyn swallowed hard. "We mean no disrespect." We are historians, seeking to understand the past. The soldier raised his spear, and the rest of the ghostly battalion followed in unison. The air grew colder, the weight of centuries pressing upon them. James, Evelyn's assistant, stumbled backward, his breathing rapid. "The curse," he muttered. "We shouldn't have come." A deep rumble shook the ground. The dunes around them shifted as if something massive stirred beneath. The very air crackled with energy as ghostly banners, long tattered and forgotten, unfurled in the spectral wind. The soldier's eyes blazed brighter. "We were betrayed in life," the lead soldier intoned, "and we shall not be betrayed in death." Evelyn's mind raced. The legend spoke of a forgotten war, a battle lost to time. Had these soldiers been condemned to eternal vigilance because their deeds had been erased from history? Was this their vengeance, their longing to be remembered? Desperation surged within her. Clutching the ancient scroll she had unearthed earlier that day, she raised it high. "Your story will not be forgotten, I swear it. Ramesses' name endures, and so will yours." The wind howled louder. The soldier regarded her, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he lowered his spear. The other soldiers followed suit. The once hostile energy shifted into something softer, almost sorrowful. "For centuries, we have wandered," the ghostly warrior whispered. "If our names are spoken once more, if our deeds are remembered, perhaps our duty is done." A gust of wind swept through the ruins, lifting sand and shadows alike. One by one, the soldiers began to fade, dissolving into golden motes that drifted towards the heavens. The night fell silent, the oppressive air lifting, leaving only the vast emptiness of the desert behind. Evelyn and her team stood there, breathless. The only evidence of what had transpired was the scroll in her hands and the lingering scent of ancient incense. James exhaled sharply. "Let's get out of here before they change their minds." Evelyn nodded, but as they turned to leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes still watched from the dunes, forever guarding the land of the pharaohs. The legend lived on. The ghosts of Karnak Temple. The Karnak Temple, one of the most ancient and revered sites in all of Egypt, stands as a testament to the power and devotion of the pharaohs. For centuries, it has been a place of worship, sacrifice, and mystery. But as the sun sets behind its towering columns and darkness blankets the temple's ruins, a different kind of presence awakens, one that whispers in the wind and lurks in the shadows. Many who visit the temple at night claim to hear ghostly murmurs, see flickering lights where none should be, and even witness shadowy figures drifting between the ancient pillars. The night was eerily silent, save for the occasional gust of wind that rattled the dry leaves and sent an unsettling chill through the air. The towering obelisks cast elongated shadows upon the cracked stone pathways, and the carvings of forgotten gods and pharaohs seemed to shift under the dim moonlight. In the distance, the faint echoes of footsteps resounded through the ruins, yet no living soul was in sight. A group of archaeologists had been granted special access to explore the temple after dark, eager to uncover its hidden secrets. Among them was Daniel Carter, a historian with an insatiable curiosity for Egypt's supernatural lore. He had spent years researching the legends of Karnak, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to experience. According to ancient tales, Karnak was once the sacred heart of the Egyptian priesthood, a place where grand ceremonies and rituals were performed to honor the gods. It was believed that the spirits of priests and fallen warriors still wandered the temple, eternally bound to its halls. Some even spoke of a vengeful spirit, an ancient high priest, who was betrayed and executed within the temple walls. His soul, they said, refused to move on, cursing those who dared disturb his resting place. As Daniel and his team navigated deeper into the ruins, they set up their equipment: infrared cameras, EVP recorders, and motion sensors. The deeper they ventured, the heavier the air became, thick with an unexplainable tension. Suddenly, one of the researchers, Emily, gasped. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, gripping Daniel's arm. A low, guttural murmur echoed through the temple, seemingly coming from the far end of the great hypostyle hall. The sound was neither the wind nor the rustling of leaves, it was unmistakably a voice. The team exchanged uneasy glances before Daniel decided to move toward the source. As they approached, their flashlights flickered, casting erratic shadows along the walls. The carvings of gods and pharaohs seemed to watch them intently, their hollow eyes following their every step. Then, the temperature dropped sharply, and a deep, resonant whisper filled the air. "Leave now." The voice sent shivers down their spines. Daniel turned sharply, scanning the area, but there was no one there. The team's EVP recorder crackled to life, playing back an unintelligible series of whispers that crescendoed into a chilling scream. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Daniel saw a shadowy figure moving between the pillars. It wasn't a trick of the light, it was real, watching them. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished into the darkness. The tomb of Pharaoh Seti. The tomb of Pharaoh Seti. The desert night was cold and eerily silent, contrasting the scorching sun that had ruled the day. A group of archaeologists, led by Dr. Michael Carter, stood before the entrance to a newly unearthed tomb deep within the Valley of the Kings. The hieroglyphs carved into the stone bore a dire warning. Whosoever disturbs the eternal slumber of Pharaoh Seti shall awaken his wrath and be lost to the sands of time. Dr. Carter, a seasoned Egyptologist, dismissed the superstition. He had spent years searching for this burial site, and now, standing at its entrance, he was not about to turn back. With cautious determination, he signaled his team to proceed inside. As they descended, the air grew thick and stale, as though time itself had stood still. The flickering torchlight cast long, unsettling shadows along the walls, revealing murals depicting the great journey of Pharaoh Seti into the afterlife. Amidst the grandeur, something felt wrong. A faint whisper echoed through the chamber, though none had spoken. "Did you hear that?" whispered Emily, one of the younger archaeologists. "It's just the wind," Carter reassured, though he felt a chill crawl up his spine. Pushing forward, they entered the burial chamber. The sarcophagus of Seti lay undisturbed, a masterpiece of ancient craftsmanship. But what caught Carter's eye was a smaller, intricately carved box near the foot of the sarcophagus. As he reached for it, the whispers grew louder, morphing into indistinct murmurs that seemed to come from all around them. Suddenly, one of the torches extinguished, plunging part of the room into darkness. The temperature dropped sharply. Then, without warning, a gust of unseen force knocked one of the crew members to the ground. "We shouldn't be here," Emily muttered, trembling. Ignoring her, Carter carefully opened the box. Inside, he found an ancient amulet, its surface covered in symbols that had not been seen in any previous tomb. The moment his fingers made contact, a deep, guttural voice echoed through the chamber. "You have trespassed where the dead must rest." A shadow moved within the tomb. Not one cast by their torches, but something else, something alive. Panic erupted among the team. One of the workers screamed as a force unseen dragged him backward into the darkness. His cries were muffled, as if the very air had swallowed him whole. Carter and Emily turned, horrified, only to realize that the entrance behind them had vanished, replaced by an unbroken wall of stone. "This isn't possible," Carter gasped, frantically running his hands along the wall. The murmurs intensified, blending into an eerie chant. The hieroglyphs on the walls seemed to glow faintly, the images of Seti's journey shifting as if alive. The painted eyes of the pharaoh followed their every move. Then he appeared. A towering figure, draped in royal burial linens, emerged from the shadows. His face was concealed by a golden death mask, and his hollow, glowing eyes burned through the darkness. It was Seti arisen, furious and unmerciful. "You have defiled my sacred tomb," the spectral voice intoned, "and now, you shall pay the price." Emily clutched Carter's arm. "We have to return the amulet." Carter hesitated but realized she was right. He fumbled with the box, attempting to place the amulet back inside, but the force that held the tomb captive resisted. The walls seemed to close in, the ceiling lowering inch by inch. A bellowing wind howled through the chamber, carrying with it ancient sand that burned their skin. Seti raised a spectral hand, and another crew member was lifted into the air, writhing in agony before vanishing into the void. "I return it, I return it." Carter screamed, hurling the amulet back onto the sarcophagus. Silence. The tomb shuddered. The glowing eyes of Seti flickered before dimming. The oppressive darkness receded, and suddenly the entrance was there once more. Without hesitation, the remaining team fled, scrambling through the passageway until they collapsed outside beneath the moonlit sky. When Carter turned back, the entrance had sealed itself, as if it had never been opened. Gasping for breath, Emily whispered, "What happened to the others?" Carter stared at the sealed tomb, They are part of his legend now. From within, the whispers continued, and they always would. The witches of ancient Egypt. For centuries, the grandeur of ancient Egypt has captivated historians and explorers alike. Its towering pyramids, enigmatic hieroglyphs, and majestic temples speak of a civilization steeped in mystery and power. But hidden within these grand tales lies a darker, more sinister legend, one whispered only in hushed tones. It is the tale of the witches of ancient Egypt, women who wielded forbidden magic, capable of summoning the spirits of the dead. The year was 1283 BC. During the reign of Pharaoh Seti I, the air was thick with incense as the night's breeze whispered through the sandstone walls of Thebes. Deep within a shadowed temple, concealed from the eyes of men, a group of veiled figures encircled a stone altar. Flickering torches illuminated the chamber, casting eerie, elongated silhouettes across the walls adorned with inscriptions of forgotten spells. Among them stood Neferet, a woman whose beauty was rivaled only by the fear she commanded. With coal-lined eyes that burned like embers, she chanted an incantation in the sacred tongue of the underworld. The air grew heavy, as if the gods themselves were watching. It was believed that some women in ancient Egypt were gifted or cursed with the ability to transcend the mortal plane. Unlike the temple priestesses who served the gods, these witches served only their own desires. They could heal or curse, summon spirits or banish them, and even manipulate fate itself. Pharaohs feared them, yet sought their guidance in secret. But above all, these witches were rumored to wield the darkest power of all, the ability to call the dead back to the realm of the living. Neferet was said to be one of the last of her kind. The people whispered that she had once resurrected a slain lover, binding his soul to his decaying corpse. Some claimed she had bargained with Anubis himself, offering blood sacrifices in exchange for immortality. The truth, however, remained buried beneath centuries of sand. On this particular night, Neferet was preparing to defy the gods once more. Before her, on the altar, lay the lifeless body of General Rahatep, a mighty warrior who had fallen in battle. His skin was ashen, his lips darkened by the kiss of death. The pharaoh had ordered his burial, yet Neferet had other plans. With a ceremonial dagger, she sliced her palm and let her blood drip onto the corpse. The crimson droplets sizzled upon contact, as if the body had suddenly come alive with hunger. The other witches swayed and chanted, their voices merging into a single, eerie hum that reverberated through the chamber. The torches flickered violently. A gust of wind, and natural and cold, swept through the temple. The inscriptions on the walls seemed to writhe, their meanings shifting as if revealing hidden truths. And then, the body of Rahatep twitched. Neferet's lips curled into a wicked smile. It had begun. The flames of the torches flickered violently as the group of explorers pressed deeper into the chamber. The air grew heavier with each step, a suffocating presence thick with the weight of history and something far darker. The whispers had not ceased. In fact, they had grown louder, echoing through the chamber in a language long forgotten. Suddenly, the ground trembled. Dust and sand cascaded from the walls as an ancient force stirred. Amelia clutched the papyrus to her chest, feeling the power it radiated, a pulsing energy that seemed to sync with her own heartbeat. The text was no longer dormant, it was awake, alive. James, standing at the edge of the group, let out a strangled gasp. His eyes widened in horror as shadowy figures began to materialize around them, women draped in flowing linen robes, their faces hidden beneath intricately woven veils. Their eyes, glowing like embers, fixed on Amelia. "You have read the words," one of the spectral figures hissed, her voice carrying both anger and sorrow. "You have awakened us." Amelia's fingers tightened around the fragile scroll. "Who are you?" she managed to whisper. "We are the daughters of Isfet, keepers of the forbidden arts. Cursed for eternity to guard the knowledge you now hold." The spectral witch stepped closer, her form flickering like a dying flame. "Return the words to the sand, or suffer the fate of those before you." James and the others exchanged fearful glances. The walls of the chamber groaned as if the very temple was breathing, reacting to their presence. "I didn't mean to disturb you," Amelia stammered. "I only wanted to understand." The witch's eyes darkened. "Understanding comes with a price." Before Amelia could react, the papyrus in her hands burst into flames, searing her palms. She screamed, dropping the burning relic, but the fire did not consume the ancient paper, it consumed her. Her veins turned black as the curse took hold, spreading like ink across her skin. The spectral witches wailed in unison, their voices weaving into an incantation that shook the temple walls. James lunged forward to help her, but an invisible force sent him flying across the chamber. The others scrambled for the exit, but the doorway they had entered through was now sealed with a solid wall of stone. They were trapped. Amelia, now writhing on the ground, gasped as her body lifted unnaturally into the air. The curse was reshaping her, binding her soul to the temple, making her one with the witches that had been cursed before her. With her final breath, she turned to James, eyes now glowing like molten gold. A slow, knowing smile crept across her lips before she vanished into the darkness, her voice joining the whispers that would haunt the chamber for eternity. The stone door suddenly crumbled, sending dust and debris cascading into the tomb. James and the others wasted no time, fleeing from the cursed temple. They did not stop running until they reached the safety of their camp. Days later, as they prepared to leave Egypt, James found himself alone in his tent, staring at his reflection in a tarnished bronze mirror. His hands trembled as he pulled back the collar of his shirt. Black veins had begun to form along his skin, the same markings that had consumed Amelia. A whisper slithered through the tent. "Understanding comes with a price." James turned, heart pounding, but there was nothing there, only the flickering of the torchlight and the feeling that he was no longer alone. The witches of ancient Egypt still watched, and now, they had found a new vessel.
If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Mystical Tales, so you won't miss out on more eerie and thrilling tales in the future. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.